In this lesson, we'll learn how to select and format text here in Illustrator. Alright, so in the last lesson we learned about the different tools for creating type here in Illustrator. Let's go ahead and start off by talking about the different areas within our type that we can actually select and modify. So if we come over here to our area type and our point type examples from the previous lesson, remember in the point type example, I mentioned that we can't actually resize the box around the type. We can only resize the type. Let me just go ahead and grab our appearance panel right now, and let's just take a look at what I have selected here. We can select the type itself, and we can actually come in and double click on this to switch over to our type tool, and we can select the individual characters themselves. That's really all you can select with point type. Now let me come over and take a look at our area type example here, and there's one additional item that we can select here. We can actually click on that and again select the type. We can double click on it and select the characters just like before, but with area type you can actually grab your direct selection arrow, and you can come in here and select the path around the type. So we can actually make changes to the actual area type box. So if we wanted to apply maybe a fill appearance attribute to the area type box, let's go ahead and just say we want to apply a color to that box. Let's go ahead and make that blue. Just like so. We can actually apply attributes to the path around an area type box. So there's an extra area we can select there. Now there's several different panels within Illustrator that actually handle working with type. And let's just go to our window drop down menu now, and let's look here under type. You can see here that there's several different panels depending on what it is you're trying to handle with your text here in Illustrator. So I tell you what, in this lesson we're going to work with the character panel and the paragraph panel here, and let's just go ahead and open up our character panel, and you can actually see that the paragraph panel should come up in the same panel dock here. So let's go ahead and talk about the character panel first. We'll go ahead and select some of our type here. Let's go ahead and select this point type. Now in the character panel there's a lot of different options here, and we'll quickly run through these. You can see here that you can select the font family and the font style here from these first two drop down menus, and if you drop this down you'll see every typeface that's installed on your machine. So you can do that. If we move down to this next area here, you're going to see some sizing options. We have the size, the point size for the type that's displayed. We can change that here. We have the leading, which is the space between lines of your type. So if this line, the text was carrying to a second line, it's actually the space between the two lines. So moving on here, we have kerning and tracking options here. Kerning is actually going to look at the space between pairs of letters, while tracking is going to look at the spacing between all selected letters. So moving on down here, we have both a horizontal scale and a vertical scale option here for your type. If you wanted to come in and maybe change that scale some, you can change the horizontal scale and you can change the vertical scale here. I'll just go ahead and undo those two options. Now this next option is for baseline shift. Now let me just zoom in on our point type here, and let's take a look here. Maybe we want to select both these two characters here and increase the baseline shift of those. Let me go ahead and just increase that up by about 5 points, and you can see exactly what that does. It shifts the baseline for those two selected characters up by exactly the amount we specified. Now let me come over here and select this M at the end here. Now this next option is to actually rotate individual characters. So let me go ahead and rotate that 90 degrees here. And you can see how we can do just that within a text selection. So if you ever find the need to do either one of those, let me go ahead and just jump out of that text selection. Quickly running through these last options in the character panel, we have a button here to underline selected text. We have a button to strike through selected text. Then we have some text anti-aliasing options here if you're producing graphics for maybe the internet. So this next drop down here is going to be for the language. Obviously we're set to US English. Now let's go ahead and select our paragraph panel and take a look at that here. Now I've actually got a paragraph of text here. Let me come over here and grab this and just drag it onto screen. And that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this so we can see some of these changes as we're making these. So we'll go ahead and select our paragraph panel here. Now this first row has is all of our alignment options for our paragraphs. So right now you can see that we are justified to the left with a ragged right. We can center our text, align it to the right with a ragged left. We can justify it to the left. We can justify it to the center. We can justify it to the right, or we can center justify it. So there's a lot of different alignment options there. Let's go ahead and go back to the flush left, ragged right. Now this next area between these two lines is actually our indentation area. Now this first control box is going to add a left indentation to an entire paragraph. You can see that that is exactly what that's doing there. Let me go ahead and change that to 0, and we can do the exact same thing over here to the right side if we wanted to add a right indentation. Now this third box here is a little different. This is our first line indentation, so this is only going to indent the first line of our paragraph. So if we wanted to do that here, we could actually indent that very first line there, just like so. Alright, now these next two options have to do with space before and space after a paragraph. So, tell you what, let me just go ahead and stretch this area type box out some, and I'm going to actually make a copy of this paragraph and paste it in so we have two paragraphs. So, let me go ahead and just double click on this window here to activate my type tool, then I'll just double click on that entire paragraph. We'll copy it with a Control C, come down here and hit enter once and paste it in. So we've got two paragraphs here. We'll just stretch that area type window out a little bit further so we've got all of our type there. So I'm going to go ahead and select this second paragraph here, and we're going to add some space before that paragraph. So you can see what that does here. Just by adding that space in, we're going to create a little bit of padding between our paragraphs. Let me go ahead and just get rid of that here. Now the second option is going to do the exact same thing, only at the end of a paragraph. So if we select this first paragraph, put in again 15 points here, you can see that we've done the exact same thing. Let me go ahead and just deselect this type here. Alright, so the last thing you see here is a checkbox marked for hyphenation. Now if we have that checked, it's going to enable hyphenation for the selected text. Now Illustrator actually has rules for the way it hyphenates bodies of copy, and we can actually get to those if we come in our paragraph panel up to the flyout menu here, and we're going to look at hyphenation right here. So you can see here that we have hyphenation turned on, and the rules as they read right now are to hyphenate words longer than 6 letters after the first 2 letters, before the last 2 letters. The hyphen limit is 0 hyphens, and then there's a hyphenation zone here. We also have an option to hyphenate capitalized words, or we can actually turn that off. So this is actually a really helpful dialog because you can preview these changes as you're making them. So we could actually select our text, our area text window here, make the changes, and actually see how it looks in real time. So let me just go ahead and cancel this window here. We also have a similar amount of control over the way that Illustrator justifies type. So I know you saw in here we have a justification option. Let me just open that up here, and you can see again some of the different options we have here for justifying our text. So you can see here that Illustrator really has a very, very large number of tools and panels and different ways that we can adjust text, we can modify our text. Let me come over here and just get rid of this space after this paragraph right here, because I want to show you one other thing we can do here, and it relates to linking a text box to another text box. So let me just go ahead and resize this text box. Let's say we've got 2 columns here we're setting up in our document, and we could either do that through the area type options, or we can actually just stretch this text box to where all the text does not fit within the area type window. And we can tell that here because there's a little red plus sign in the bottom right hand corner. Now let me come in here and use my type tool, and I'm just going to draw another area type window. Now, I want to point out something to you that has to do sort of with the anatomy of an area type window. Notice here we have a little box here in the top left corner. We also have a little box down here in the bottom right corner. Basically, this is an import and this is an output, and it has to do with threading text. Let me show you what I mean here. I'm going to go ahead and just drag a marquee around both of these text windows here. Now remember, this text actually was too large to fit in its box, but we can actually come over here and click on this little red plus sign. And notice here that I now have a loaded cursor. That means this cursor has text that it wants to put somewhere. We can actually come over here and drop another text box, or we can link it to this text box we just drew simply by mousing over the import. Now if I do that, notice here there's a little chain link icon that appears next to my cursor. Let me just go ahead and click in that import. And you can see here that we've drawn sort of an invisible link between the two text boxes. Now if I deselect that, that link's going to go away, and we could actually maybe just resize these so that the text does indeed fit inside these, or we could actually draw even a third text box if we needed it and then link that. So you aren't limited by the number of text boxes you can link together. And you can see as we resize our text boxes, even with them linked, the text is going to automatically adjust itself according to the size or the new sizes of its area text window. Okay, so just to look at one other important element when dealing with text in Illustrator, I wanted to just point out to you this text in this logo. Remember we looked at this and we know that this text cannot be modified because it's actually shapes with a stroke or a fill. Now we can actually create that type of text by creating outlines from our text. Let me just go ahead and zoom in on our point type here. We'll just go ahead and select that. Remember, this is still point type. We can select it and we can change it however we need to. But if we select this and we come up to our type drop down and choose this create outlines option, notice the keyboard shortcut is Shift Control O, and that's one I use a lot personally. If we do that, we're actually going to convert this, and it's no longer type. If we look in our appearance panel, it's now a group. So basically we now have several objects here that are grouped together where we used to have type. Now we could come in and we could make changes to these like they were actual vector shapes. We could come in, select a certain number of the anchor points. We could make changes to them. Notice that if we come in and select a few of these, let me just ungroup this group here so we can select individual letters. Let's select this E. Notice that that E has been converted to a compound path because we have a hole in it. So if you remember the lesson from a few lessons back when we talked about compound paths, we talked about basically creating one of these is basically using a second shape to create a knocked out portion of an original shape. So in the case of this O, if we ever needed to come in and release the compound path, remember we could just come up here to Object, choose Compound Path, and Release. And what we're left with here is two different shapes. One for the inside counter of the O and one for the outside of the O. So you can see here now how there are a lot of different options in Illustrator for creating, for managing, for formatting your text. And in fact, we haven't even gone through all of the different panels, and we won't be able to in this course. But if you need to find any of the other panels in Illustrator that have to do with type, you can find those under the Window drop-down menu, under Type, and you can see them all listed right in here. So in this lesson we've learned how to select and format text here in Illustrator. In the next lesson we're going to learn how to create type on a path.